Hello class, welcome to week 6. I just want to take a little time to go over some of the things that are due this week. You have your quiz 6 that's going to be due this week, the discussion board, and your cap 6 assignment. So let me go over the discussion board for this week. You will post a question about something that you're not too clear about, or maybe you want to know a little bit more about, and that could go from any statistics assignments that we've had so far, if something is not totally clear to you. Also, anything having to do with the structure of your critical assignment, whether it's the structure, APA formatting, looking up research articles, or something specific to your research question. Go ahead and post that in this week's discussion board by Thursday, and then you have till Sunday to post 2 responses or to responses to 2 of your classmates' questions. Next, I want to go over Cap 6, data collection and analysis. So let me clarify one thing. You guys are not going to actually conduct this study that you are creating. I'm not sure if that was clear from the beginning, but this is sort of a mock research project. So when it comes to this portion, data collection, you're not really going to perform all the tests that you've been writing about. You will compile sham data. Sham, technically it means placebo intervention or drug or something like that. In this case, we're using it as mock data. So you're going to create or make up the data that's going to go into your study. So if you open up the sample results, it's going to look something like this. And I have this spreadsheet open up. I have it opened up on Stat Plus because I'm using the Mac right now. So I want to show you some of the statistics that you might be running. And so, like it says in the instructions, you need at least 10 subjects. So here you go, 10 subjects. You're going to need to put down some demographic information. So gender, age, height, weight, at least that information. Also notice that this study, or in this analysis, we have 2 groups. We have a high intensity interval training group, and we also have a continuous training group. So they're split up into these 2 sections here. Next, notice that the 2 measurements that it's one measurement, it's the VO2 max, but they tested it at different times. One thing to note here is that my VO2 measurements, I'm not putting the actual measurement in each cell. It's just going to be numbers, and you can use decimals, but don't put any of the unit of measurements in the actual cells. You're going to put that up here on the title of that column. So if you're using strength, then you're going to use pounds or kilograms. If you're using power, then you use foot pounds or newtons. If it's a timed trial, something like that, then you would put that if you're measuring in seconds or minutes, but make sure that you don't put any of the unit of measurements in each cell. Okay, so the first calculation that you're going to perform is the mean, followed by standard deviation. So it says you need at least the mean and the standard deviation. So as you can see here, this has already been calculated. For your data, you're going to do this on your own. So remember, you've already done this. This was a week 1 assignment. So if you look back to those calculations, this was your assignment right here. So you've already done this. So if you look in Appendix A, I believe, in the back of the book, it'll walk you through how to perform that analysis on Excel. And then if you have Stat Plus, it's run pretty much the same way. Next, you're going to perform the appropriate analysis. So here it says correlations, predictions, regression, or inferential statistics. And that all depends on what kind of study you're running. So what I would recommend is you go over chapters 3, 4, and 5 again, because that's where it explains what each statistic is for. And I'm going to give you a little example here and give you a little explanation just to brief you a little bit and get everyone on the same page. Okay, so the first statistic that you can run is the correlation coefficient. And this is described, again, and you remember you guys have already done this. It's on page 424, and it walks you through each of the steps of how to calculate that. In their example, they use body weight, chin-ups, and pull-ups. So use this statistic when you want to find some sort of relationship between a few variables. In this case, if I wanted to, I could run a correlation between weight and VO2 max before any type of training. I can run a correlation coefficient for height and weight, or I can just select all of these variables and find a full matrix showing me the correlation for each variable or each combination of variables. So to kind of explain here what we're looking at, remember when it comes to correlation, we're looking for this R value. And the R value goes from 0 to 1, and it can be negative or positive. Remember, negative and positive numbers in this case don't represent good or bad. So for example, when you look at let's say gender and height, there's a slight positive correlation there, meaning males are probably going to be taller than females. Another one is gender and weight. Again, males are probably going to be a little bit heavier than females. And then we also have a high correlation between height and weight. So you would expect a taller person to be heavier than a shorter person. And if you look further down on this table, we have age compared to VO2 max, and we have an R of negative 0.04. So that's not going to be a very high correlation. It's negative, but it's not really high. So you can't say that there is any type of correlation. So when you're describing this, you're not really going to talk about all these variables or combination of variables that are close to 0, because a correlation of 0 means that there's absolutely no correlation. So you're not really going to talk about these. You're not going to mention them in your results section. What you want to talk about is anything that's 0.8 and above, because that's going to be a high correlation, whether it's negative or positive. Next, let's talk about the t-test for two independent groups. You'll find this on page 77 of your textbook. In the book, it gives you an example of serving scores for varsity and subvarsity. In this case, I'll use the data that we have here, where we talk about VO2 max measurements. And what I can compare here is, if I wanted to use a t-test, or if I have this type of data, I can compare t-test pre-training for both groups, for the high intensity interval training group and the continuous training group. So when I do that, I get this. So again, there's a lot of extra information here that is a little bit out of the scope of what we need to know here. So the main thing you're going to look for is this right here, the P level under the two-tailed distribution, and it's at 0.53. So that's, and remember our P level should be, for it to be significant, it has to be less than 0.05. So there's no significant difference between the VO2 maxes before training for the HIIT group and the continuous group. So what I did there was just compared all these figures with all these figures here, and there was no significant difference. Okay, so now what if I wanted to compare just one group, but the measurements that I took before training and the measurements that I took after training? Well, in that case, I will need a paired t-test. So if you look on page 79, it's the dependent t-test for paired groups. Paired groups meaning it's one group and we're taking two measurements at two different times. So that, in this case, will look, like this. And again, just so you guys can understand what this statistic is giving you, you get the mean, the standard deviation, and the variance. And the main thing that you're looking at, again, is under two-tailed distribution is a p-level, and it's at 0. So that would mean that there is a significant difference because p would be less than 0.05. Okay, so what if you had 3 groups? Let's say you had a HIT group, a continuous training group, and let's say you had a, I don't know, a swimming endurance group. So then you would have another set of data way down here. Then in that case, you wouldn't use the paired t-test, you wouldn't use the independent t-test. You would use a one-way ANOVA. And you guys have also calculated that in your previous assignment. So here's the assignment that you guys did earlier in the course. And in this case, we had 3 groups that performed a 1 RM bench press. And when we did the one-way ANOVA there, this is what we got. And I'm showing you this now on Excel. And again, what we're looking for here is a p-value. And this is telling us that there is a difference between all 3 groups, but it doesn't tell us which groups are different than another group. It doesn't say if group 1 is different than group 2 or 1 and 3. And it's only telling us that there is a difference between all 3 of them. To further pick out which specific groups are different, that takes a different statistic, but that you're not doing that in this class. Okay, so I hope that helped clear up some of the questions of what statistics you need to run and what they actually mean, so and what the actual values that you're looking for. The last part of this assignment is to write an APA formatted results section. So to give you an idea about that, there's a link to this study on that learning activity page. And what I'm looking for is a paragraph that looks similar to this. So basically telling me which statistics you ran. In this case, it's going to give you a little bit, it shows an example of a more complicated study. But for example, you would tell me that you ran a paired t-test between pre and post VO2 max scores for each of the groups, the HIT group and the continuous training group. And then so actually you guys can just put both of these, like these 2 type of paragraphs, under the results section, and you could put a subheading saying statistical analysis. And then the next one, you don't have to put a subheading. But the next paragraph should tell me, okay, what was significant, if there was any significance. If there wasn't anything really significant, if there's no difference between your pre and post measurements or one group and the other group's measurements, then just note any statistics that came near to being significant. So if you got a P of, let's say, 0.06. That's pretty close to being less than 0.05, but it wasn't significant. You can still talk about it, but make sure that you don't state that it was significant. So for example, here it says the multiple set group significantly increased peak torque at 60 degrees per second, and it says between the pre-test and the mid-test. So again, you would tell me, the HIT group significantly increased their VO2 max between the pre and post test. And then the next one says there was no difference between the mid test and the post test. So you can state when there is no difference between 2 measurements. So once you've completed both of those, you should, like it says here, you should turn in an Excel file or a Stat Plus file, and also an APA formatted results section. So the results section should be on a Word document, and it just needs to be 1 to 2 paragraphs. So just to kind of give you the big picture here, each of these CAP assignments that you've been turning in will be all combined into one document, and that will be your final cap. That will be the total research project. But for now, you're just turning in one section at a time, and at the end of on the last week, when you have to turn in the full document with corrections, then you will have there's a template that shows you what order I want it in and what headings I want on each section. But for now, all I need is this just this result section, and then a separate Excel file. So that's what you'll be turning in for Cap 6. Hopefully this helped you. If you have any questions, just email me or post something on a discussion board. Hopefully this sparks a little bit of discussion, maybe questions about the cap. We have about 2.5 weeks left, so if you're still unsure of anything, please reach out to me and let me know so I can try to help you out. All right, thank you and have a great week.